Hello everybody and welcome to the Ability Show. We're so happy that you're back with us and we hope that today's topic will really inspire and educate you. My name is Crystal Asige and on today's episode, we are going to be talking about mental health. Mental health, a very controversial and a very hot topic at the moment in society, all around the world, not just in Kenya. Because, of course, of its taboo and its stigma, but also because nowadays so many more people are trying to talk about it and trying to come out and understand it much more so that they can help themselves and the people who are around them. The reason that the Ability Show wants to delve into the topic of mental health today is because we feel like there are many parallels between mental health and also disability, not just because the disability spectrum includes intellectual disabilities and mental disorders, but also because of the things that people go through emotionally, for example, depression, for example, anxiety, and so on and so forth within the disabled community, which of course is similar to those who go through mental health conditions as well. Right here where I work at the Open Institute, we run sessions that are called Speak Up sessions. Speak Up sessions happen every single week on a Tuesday lunchtime, whereby all the staff members sit around together over our lunch break and have topics that we discuss and go back and forth and try to educate ourselves on every single week, like I said. The reason that we wanted to start Speak Up sessions over the last year is because we want to expand our capacity and our understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The reason why diversity, equity, and inclusion is very important to us here at the Open Institute and on the Ability program is because we don't want to just be the kind of people that have our own little silos that we live in. We don't want to just experience what we experience and know what we know and hang out with people that we want to hang out with and just, walk around in life generally just being islands. We want to understand other types of people and other types of communities and what people go through on a day-to-day basis, whatever that might look like in culture, in religion, in background, in parenting, so on and so forth. And today's topic is going to be specifically about mental health. Most recently, we have been talking about this issue of mental health because it's massively important, first of all. And second of all, it's something that is a buzz topic at the moment in society. So we thought we would sit down together for at least a few weeks and try to tackle this particular issue. And the reason why we want to talk about it today on the Ability Show is because not just of the reason I just mentioned, but also because of the parallels between mental health and disability. You will notice over the last few episodes of the Ability Show that there is a parallel and an overlap between things like mindset, things like the national psychology, things like long-standing narratives about disability and about disabled people and what they might or might not go through. Furthermore, within disability, you may also have heard of the term invisible disabilities. These include not just sensory disabilities like the deaf and the visually impaired, but also intellectual disabilities. And this is a massively wide spectrum, which includes things like autism, bipolar, ADHD, schizophrenia, so on and so forth. And these are also termed mental health disorders. And this is where we draw the parallel and what we want to talk about on today's show. Recently, the Ability Show was very privileged to be able to sit in on a mental health panel discussion at an event which was held at the National Theatre and organized by Karatana and HeadSpace. This particular event had some amazing thought leaders in the topic of mental health. And in this program, we will be showing you snippets of some of the discussions that were had on that evening. Throughout this particular show, we would love for you to keep in mind and connect the dots between these different aspects: mental health disorders, the disabled community and what they go through mentally and emotionally, and intellectual disabilities themselves. To introduce us to today's topic, Chow Tole is in the first clip, describing and painting us a very brief picture of the different statistics surrounding mental health disorders in the world. Let's have a look.
Right now, 300 million people are suffering from depression worldwide. 300 million. 1 out of 100,000, 1 in 100,000, that is the ratio of psychiatrists to the population in low-income countries. Another statistic is that by 2030, mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, will be the leading cause of mortality and morbidity in the world. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide, and mental illnesses and cardiovascular diseases are the top drivers of lost productivity. And finally, suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst the youth aged between 15 and 29 years, with 79% of suicides occurring in low and middle income countries.
300 million people suffer from depression alone in the world. 300 million. That is an extremely high number for just one mental health disorder. And still, there is so much stigma around it, and stereotyping, and secrecy, especially in our African communities. Pastor Morethi talks to us about churches being a place that should allow people to come and feel open enough to talk about these things. But unfortunately, it's the absolute opposite, which is then amplified further by a doctor and psychologist, Kirindi Odindo. Let's have a listen to the both of them speaking about mental health issues in church and with men and women specifically.
Church can be the best place to hide. People hide in church. And church can be the place to pretend that everything is okay and to just come with a nice smile. Best Sunday. You know, I always say, even the whole idea of Sunday best. I know we grew up with Sunday best. You know, if you're going to church, you put on your nice clothes, which, of course, is a metaphor because it tells you put on your best behavior. In other words, be unreal, because the rest of the week you don't wear Sunday best. So it's almost like now pretend to be somebody else. You kaza there for the time that you're there. Then you go home and you can now become who you're supposed to be. And I think that is a lie. It was never meant to be that. I think it's one of the things that I feel can be a contributor to some of the crisis we're seeing in our nation. That somehow church can be the place where you're supposed to find hope can become the place where you actually don't find it. And worse, you can't even dare to show that you're struggling. And I think maybe it's ignorance for us as spiritual leaders. But many times when you see somebody with mental health issues, you think they have a demon, they're possessed, they just need prayer. And as spiritual leaders, we need the education that helps us begin to understand that mental health is a real issue, just like physical health. When somebody comes to church and they have cholera, when somebody comes to church and they have a broken arm, you pray for them and then you tell them, go and get checked by the doctor. It's the same thing with mental health. I mean, we need to move away from the stigma, because if we can get that in the church, I think we can give people the language to know that it's normal, it's okay to be broken. At work, you're a factor of production. When you don't perform, you're out. You find many people don't even have a place to talk. And it's worse for men, by the way. They say that, I was saying that it's actually, I think of the statistics that are known, because there are very few statistics of suicide in Kenya. But they say that 80%, at least 2017 statistics, of reported suicide were by men. And part of the reason is because, guys, we don't even know how to talk. Yeah? You can be boys with somebody for years. By the way, we can be tight. If somebody tells you who's your boy, you're like, this is my boy. But that guy, you don't know where he lives. You don't know what his father is called. You don't even know you don't know anything about the guy. All you know is he's Arsenal, me and Man U. That's all we know. And we don't ever go deep. And the problem is we're raised like that as men. We're taught to just have walls, to front for each other. We're always competing.
Why do you think men are the ones who have the highest suicide rate? The methods. Men will always use more violent and more final methods. Women use softer methods, and that give them more opportunity to come out. So women will always be higher in statistics of suicidal attempts because they'll use overdosing. They'll mostly use mostly overdosing. Men will be violent, guns, knives, hanging, and it'll be more final. At that time, in that moment, most people believe it's taking away the pain. It's the method that means that they're not going to be saved.
These statistics about men and women and the different ways that they handle depression and mental health disorders really blew me away. And I feel that this is a really important topic to discuss between groups of men and separately between groups of women, because we clearly handle mental health disorders in very, very different ways. And here in our country, because of the stigma, like I said, and the secrecy and all of the negativity that comes with mental disorders, it is even more heightened than it needs to be. But fortunately, we are in an age that is talking about these issues much more than they ever have been. And that, for me, is a massive step forward in mainstreaming mental health issues, as well as the parallels that go into mental health issues. Next, Daktari continues to explain to us the signs that we should all be looking out for within ourselves and other people when trying to figure out if somebody is on the brink or at risk of some kind of mental health condition. She explains this very well and very eloquently and makes us really understand the small intricacies in this particular topic. Let's have a listen to the different signs and triggers that we should all be looking out for.
The statistic given in Kenya is that there's about, I think, 3.2, 3.8 of every 100,000 people. So anybody who's really good at math, take that into a percentage, that's a pretty low percentage. The truth is, of the people who commit suicide, if you look back at their history, you do discover between 30 to 80% have had some kind of mental disorder. Because I have symptoms of depression that would be physically maybe sleeping too much, sleeping too little, eating too much, eating too little, could be exhaustion, tired, fatigue. If we're looking at emotional symptoms and we're saying there's a lot of sadness, feelings of worthlessness, feeling helpless, having suicidal ideation, which means having the ideas that life's not good enough as it is and I don't want to be around to see this, which is very different from acting upon it. And I think that's very important to make that distinction, that just because I'm having some extreme stressor, could have lost a job, or there's an issue with finances, there could be a loss in relationship, and I just feel like there is no more purpose, doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily go and commit suicide. So what has happened now is a bit of normalization of suicide or fear of it, to the point that anybody who seems to express anything close to "I just don't like my life," suddenly everyone's hovering. And I think we also have to be careful not to be, to what we call in clinical terms, reify, which means don't glorify the existence of something to the point that you believe that it is all around us. That does not mean minimize it when there's actual reason. And normally, suicide is a health space and it's multifactorial. There'll be many factors that will determine who is at risk. Number one, yes, a mood disorder, some kind of either depression or bipolar. Will there be anxiety, very high anxiety, social anxieties? Is there some kind of mental health disorder? Okay, so there would be some kind of likelihood with schizophrenia or psychosis, and this is what we talk about when we see people that we consider in our common parlance as crazy, losing their mind, out of touch of reality. People with impulse control problems, where emotions and what we now have is what we call emotional dysregulation disorders. So people who feel emotion in a way that's not within the 90%. So they come from ground 0 to 10 really fast, where sadness is felt at a level that is so deep. And for a lot of people where suicide is concerned, what they do say is that a lot of people who make the attempt, and what I know, is they just want to take the pain away. And it's extreme levels of pain. So it will be in situations where the average person does not perceive. And this is how so many people who commit suicide, most people will not know. They will come back and say, we were with them yesterday. I spoke to this person this morning. And there would have been no indication. And so if you don't dig a little further, if you don't go deeper than just what is at surface level, then it's very difficult to see who is at risk, what's going on in their lives.
Daktari then continued to explain to us how acquiring a disability can further debilitate somebody and their mental health. This is something that is definitely not understood by many people who are able-bodied. because they think, oh, it must be better for you to have acquired a disability than to have been born with one. I'm usually asked the same question. Crystal, would you rather have been born blind, or would you just have rather continued the way you did, which is acquire a disability? And I never know how to explain that, because either way, it is life-changing. Either way, it is something that cannot really be understood by the ordinary person. But let's continue having a listen to the discussion.
Does there seem to be some kind of stressor? It could be a chronic illness. People who've had debilitating diseases like spinal injuries, things that have made their lifestyles shift so fast that they cannot cope with their change of status, the change of who they are at risk. If there's been some kind of loss, like I say, the major losses, loss of a job, finance, because that's linked to status, that's linked with my self-worth, that's linked with how I view myself. And so are there people who talk with a lot of self-hatred or self-loathing or very demeaning around who they are and what their successes are? Are they hopeless, worthless? Are they talking with some sense of powerlessness around their world, losing control about what's happening in their world? And they seem to be engaging in a lot of discussion around death, preoccupied about death. Are they withdrawing? Are they losing interest and focus? Or if there were people who you did know were depressed or suddenly look happy, and it just turns around overnight, and there's a sense of elation, and it's not spirit, it's not like the spirit has touched them, then there just seems to be like an overnight shift in who they are and what they are and what seems to be coming to the table. Are they putting together, and this does not mean that you should not put a will, but are you talking about wills? Are you giving away possessions? Are you starting to say goodbye, quote unquote, talking to everybody, reaching out to people that you wouldn't? And so these things have to be taken in totality, so that you're not taking the one thing and someone says, hey, I've written a will, and then you're saying, well, I think they're going to go and kill themselves.
Senator Sylvia Kasanga from the Makueni County was there to talk about the mental health bill that is right now trying to go through Parliament and to be implemented in the country. This will hopefully see the NHIF include and recognize mental health as part of their services, as well as ensure every single health facility in the country, all across all the counties, have some kind of mental health professional in that particular facility so that anybody can be helped. Unfortunately, until very recently, it has always been thought that mental health and mental health disorders is a condition and an issue that are faced by the higher tier of the country, the upper class. It has never been really thought as something that people in the middle and lower class suffer from or can even get help with. And that's why so many people go without talking about it and dying, literally dying from mental health issues. So let's have a listen to what the Senator had to say about what the government is doing to improve the state of mental health care.
The bill is very wide. Actually, the bill first brings the old bill into the new dispensation. So we have the national and county government roles and responsibilities that are clearly defined when it comes to mental health. One significant new change that has come in is the fact that we want to streamline mental health into the health system. Indeed, we want NHIF to cover not just treatment, but rehabilitation. From every hospital, dispensary, level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 hospitals, there must be representation of mental health practitioners, which includes psychologists. And true enough, as a member of parliament, my task is to identify what are the issues, where are the gaps, and then see how we can deal with them, in terms of sealing the gaps through legislation and through lobbying. We do a lot of lobbying to government when we want some things done. Like I can tell you now, the lobbying that we are doing for the mental health bill, as we wait for it to become an act of parliament, we have to speak to NACADA, we have to speak to the Ministry of Education, because we realize anything mental health is cross-cutting. So you have different forums with different government officials to see how then they can begin to plug in as we wait for the bill to become an act.
Psychologist Dr. Odindo then comes back into the conversation to further reinforce what the Senator has just explained to us. She says that it's not actually just on the shoulders of the government to do their part for mental health care in the country, but also it's up to us us as individuals, us as the friends of, the family, the neighbors, the community, the schools of the people who are going through these conditions, to also have an awareness of what to do and how to spot it very early on. Have a listen to this.
Community mental health is the way to take it. If you look at the issue of suicide, it's not even taken up from an individual space like ours in any other working health system. It is a community issue because it's a wider sociological and psychological and health. It's a multidisciplinary issue. I mean, it happens to be us talking about it because someone has to start from somewhere. But ideally, it is supposed to bring in the education system, you've got the church system as support network, or whatever other traditional systems that sit in place that allow for advocacy to happen. But the biggest issue, really is the stigma. We haven't even began with the smaller issues in mental health because of stigma. And this is even in high end. This is even where people have the money. But like anything else that is outside the mainstream, is how do we bring it into everyday conversation? So this needs media, this needs our government to really be, they're the number one agent. Because this is tier 1 all the way down. So it is done in layers. It is done at every single space. It's done with wasani like you. It is done with all the people out there who are saying, we're going to make it so common that you're going to be talking about it like bread in the morning.
Now, let's take a quick pause on the mental health discussion and get into what is always my favorite part of the show, which is Ask Ability. Because it's the opportunity for us to interact with each other and you asking us questions about disability and, of course, us trying to answer them as best as possible. Here we go. Welcome to the part of the show where you get to ask Ability. Today we have a question from John, who works in a supermarket. And he says that he recently had a customer who was deaf who came into the supermarket and he had to attend to him. He wasn't too sure what to do. He felt a little bit fumbly. He was unsure, unconfident what to say, how to say it, how to communicate well with the customer who was deaf. So he asks, what are the best practices? Thank you for your question, John. Let's talk about it.
This is how we do it.
So John, this is actually a really difficult one. I feel many people have struggles with trying to communicate well with a deaf person. The tips that I would say are really useful for me in general and also other people who I have interacted with are, number one, if you can, please try as best as possible to speak to a deaf person right in front of them. Right parallel so that they can see your face clearly. Don't speak to them on the side or behind them, etc. Try and do it so that they can see and read your lips because some deaf people are able to lip read. Number two, I would also say that you should use facial expressions to accompany what you're trying to communicate. So if you're happy, smile. If you're frustrated, do the same. Have your expressions match what you're trying to communicate so that they can also try and follow what you're saying, because obviously if you can't sign language and they can't hear you, then at least facial expressions will help the conversation be a little bit more rich. Number three, try and have a notebook and pen in handy when you think you're going to be talking to a deaf person in any kind of circumstance. The reason for this is that if you can't sign language that they can't hear, then at least you can write things down to communicate that way, which makes things so much easier. General tips as well I'd give you is try and get some sign language lessons in. If you can, just a few words, a few phrases, so that you can also show the deaf person that, you know what, I'm trying to communicate with you as best as I can, and people really appreciate when you put in the effort. I hope that helps. Remember, the golden rule has always been treat people the way you want to be treated. But here at Ability, we use the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated and not the way you think that they should be treated. If you have any more questions that you'd like to ask us, please email us on ability@openinstitute.com, or you can follow us on all our social media platforms, and our handle is just Open Institute.
We need to start creating that primary healthcare system where you then move it along the process according to what people see. Because where there's no doctor, we're not all going to get people from Cuba to come and help us. The truth is, we will never have enough psychologists. It is never going to happen. And so, in the absence of that, how do we use the churches, the mosques, all the religious people? How do we use the other people that were the crowd that was deferred to, whether it's the educational, whether it is the caregivers within a space, and that's the way it has to happen. Of course, who's going to pay the money for that capacity building? And now therein lies where we hope there'll be some kind of legislation that offers that opportunity. Because the truth is, everybody's moving to traditional birthers now. And they've realized there's never going to be an OBGYN in a village. So we just need to now start upgrading the skills that the traditional people have. And that's the way to go. Otherwise, it'll never get any better.
There's so much more to be discussed about mental health in Kenya and in the world. Here at the Open Institute and on the Ability Show, we are trying to do exactly that. We are trying to educate ourselves internally as staff members, educate you as the audience of the show, so that we can intrinsically understand these things and these conditions surrounding mental health, not just with the disabled community, but also with people who are able-bodied as well. So that, hey, we can go out into the world and share the knowledge and try to help other people within our own spheres and our own circles. That's all that we're trying to do. And we hope this particular episode has helped you gain a little bit more confidence in understanding mental health disorders so that you can recognize it in yourself and other people. Thank you so much for watching. As always, my name is Crystal Asige, and this is The Ability Show. And we will be back next week with another amazing topic that you can sink your teeth into. Thanks. Bye. And